In a city that never slows down, what slips through the cracks? When silence becomes normal, when cries are muffled by walls, when danger hides in plain sight, who's paying attention? Mumbai, 2013. A young journalist sets out on an assignment, unaware that the place she walks into has already swallowed someone else before her. Why did no one act the first time? How many lives must break before the system responds? This isn't just about one brutal crime. It's about everything that allowed it to happen, twice. It's about voices once ignored, now demanding to be heard. This is not just a case file. It's a reckoning. This is the story of Shakti Mills and the women who refuse to be forgotten. Welcome to the crime series. I am glad to have you join us on another video. Kindly subscribe, like, and share. Let me know where you are watching from. In the heart of Mumbai, a city of contradictions where luxury towers rise above crumbling chawls and dreams brush shoulders with desperation, lived a young woman named Rhea Sharma. Born in a modest two-bedroom apartment in the old city lanes of Pune, Rhea was the youngest child of two dedicated schoolteachers. Her father taught history in a government high school, while her mother worked as a literature instructor at a local girls' college. Books filled every corner of their home. Stories of revolutions, freedom fighters, poetry, and prose shaped her childhood more than toys or cartoons ever did. They weren't wealthy, but they were rich in ideals. From an early age, Rhea learned to question, to listen, to write, not for praise, but for impact. She would often be found scribbling in hand-me-down notebooks, piecing together short stories inspired by what she overheard on the street or saw in newspapers. Even as a little girl, Rhea never fit neatly into the world around her. While other kids played outside, she crafted poems in torn notebooks, listened to news debates beside her father, and often stayed up past bedtime, reading biographies of activists and journalists. Her mother's words, "Your voice is your weapon, never let the world silence it," became her compass. In school, Rhea stood out, not because she spoke the loudest, but because she listened the deepest. She volunteered at women's shelters, helped write local newsletters for slum redevelopment programs, and always gravitated toward stories that others were too afraid to tell. Despite the odds, Rhea earned a scholarship to study journalism at a prestigious college in Mumbai. It was her first time living away from home, a chaotic, emotional transition. But she adapted quickly. Her curiosity, discipline, and sense of justice made her stand out. Professors praised her. Classmates admired her drive. She was never one to chase clout or comfort. She chased stories. Mumbai was everything Pune wasn't: louder, faster, and far less forgiving. But Rhea adjusted quickly. She moved into a cramped flat in Dadar, shared with 3 other female students, and juggled classes with her internship at the Mumbai Sentinel, a bold English-language magazine known for its fearless investigative work. That internship was her shot, not at fame, but at change. On the afternoon of August 22, 2013, her editor handed her an assignment: document the ruins of Mumbai's forgotten mills, once the industrial heart of the city, now hollow shells being reclaimed by nature and neglect. It wasn't front-page material, but to Rhea, every untold story mattered. She was paired with a fellow intern, Aditya Kale, a 24-year-old amateur photographer from Thane. Quiet and thoughtful, Aditya was the kind of person who noticed things others didn't. He had grown up in a broken home and taken up photography as a means of expression. Though they weren't particularly close, he and Rhea worked well together, respectful, curious, driven. Their target location was Shakti Mills, a decaying textile compound near Mahalakshmi, once bustling with workers and machinery, now silent and overrun with vines and rust. A place most people avoided. A place the city had long forgotten. The Shakti Mills compound stood like a relic. Red bricks crumbling, iron bars twisted, and trees splitting through broken concrete. The entrance was unguarded. Unofficial access, their editor had said. Just get the shots, then get out. Rhea adjusted the strap of her camera and stepped inside, her mind already framing compositions. Sunlight streamed through collapsed ceilings. Ferns grew wild over machines frozen in time. She raised her lens, trying to capture how beauty still lingered in decay. Then came the voice. "Need help getting a better angle?" A man stepped out from the shadows, scruffy, mid-20s, wearing a cheap, dirt-stained shirt. Before either of them could react, another man emerged. Then a third, then two more, 5 in total. They spoke casually, almost politely at first, claimed to be railway workers, offered to take them to a part of the building with a better view. "Come, we've helped photographers before," one said. Ria hesitated, so did Aditya. The moment stretched, long enough to feel wrong, but not long enough to escape. The presence of 5 strangers had shifted the entire atmosphere. There was no rush, no chaos, only a cold, practiced confidence. They had done this before. They didn't need to shout or brandish weapons to establish dominance. Their silence was louder than violence. Aditya Kal was their first target. He barely had time to process what was happening before they were on him. 2 of the men grabbing him forcefully, slamming him against a moss-covered wall. A third joined, landing a brutal punch to his face. Disoriented and bleeding, Aditya was dragged toward a darkened corridor of the mill, his protests muffled as one man shoved a filthy rag into his mouth. His hands were bound tightly with a belt. His legs kicked out weakly, but they were outnumbered, and resistance only seemed to excite them. Ria stood frozen, her heart pounding. For a brief second, she considered running. But before she could move, the cold edge of a broken bottle pressed against her arm. A sharp sting followed, a warning rather than a wound. Her instincts screamed, but her limbs betrayed her. Panic and shock had locked her in place. They stripped her of her camera, her phone, and any remaining sense of security. The camera, her tool, her voice, was smashed to pieces on the ground, the lens shattering like a broken dream. Her phone followed, stomped into fragments. Everything she had walked in with was taken, as if erasing her identity was the first step. They pushed her deeper into the compound, a place where time stood still and help was impossibly far away. The once proud walls of the mill, covered in vines and stained by time, bore silent witness to the horror that unfolded next. The assault was calculated and brutal. One by one, they took turns inflicting trauma that went beyond the physical. Their threats were quiet but chilling. Photographs were taken during the act, used as leverage, a sick tactic to ensure silence. Each moment was designed to dominate, to erase dignity, to leave behind not just pain, but fear. It lasted for what felt like an eternity. When it was over, they disappeared back into the ruins, leaving behind silence, wreckage, and the shattered remains of 2 lives. Ria, soaked in blood and trembling, found her way back to Aditya. He was semi-conscious, barely able to lift his head. She untied him with unsteady hands. Neither spoke a word. They stumbled together out of the compound, every step a struggle. It took time to find a road, to flag down help, to reach safety. But somehow they did. At the hospital, the staff quickly grasped the severity of what had happened. Ria was examined, her injuries documented, and a case was opened. She was offered a moment to pause, to think. But she didn't hesitate. Despite the pain, the trauma, and the threats, she made her decision with clarity. She would not be silenced. Inside one of the hospital's private emergency rooms, Ria Sharma lay motionless on a stretcher. Her body was bruised and aching, her clothes torn, her spirit shaken, but not broken. The trauma still gripped her, but something deeper had taken root in her. Not far from her, Aditya Kale sat slumped in a wheelchair. His lip was split, his eye swollen shut. A nurse had placed an ice pack in his hand, but he barely noticed. His gaze remained locked on Ria, the shock of the night still unfolding silently between them. The doctors moved swiftly, methodically. They followed protocol, handling her with care, documenting injuries, preserving forensic evidence. There was no small talk, only quiet professionalism. Every bruise, every cut, every sample collected was a piece of a larger puzzle that would soon be placed before the court. The police were informed immediately. A female officer from Mumbai's crime branch arrived within the hour. She had seen this kind of case before, but this one, she sensed, was different. It wasn't just another assault. It was an act of brutal defiance in a city already growing tired of its own silence. Ria, despite the pain and disorientation, asked to give her statement that night. It was raw, difficult but precise. She recounted the entire ordeal, descriptions of each attacker, their threats, the sequence of events, even the layout of the ruins. She told them about the photos they had taken during the attack, about the threats to leak them. But she didn't falter. Her voice, though hoarse and uneven, was firm. Her decision had already been made. She would not back down. Back home, Ria's parents were winding down for the night when the phone rang, an unknown number, an unfamiliar voice. The caller informed them of their daughter's assault and to let them know she was still in the hospital. The words hit like a storm. Her mother froze. Her father's face went blank. For a moment, time stood still. No details, no explanations, just fear. Unspoken, immediate. The train to Mumbai moved steadily through the night, but inside the silence was heavy. Ria's parents sat without words. What could be said? No conversation could prepare them for what they were about to witness. Their daughter, battered, bruised, but alive. If you found this story compelling and appreciate the way we bring real-life cases to you, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss an update. Your support helps us continue to uncover the truth and share these important stories. Like, share, and let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Let's keep the conversation going. When they entered the hospital room, Ria turned her head slowly. In their eyes, she didn't find pity. She found something stronger. Resolve. They didn't ask questions. They didn't need answers. Their presence was enough. From that moment forward, they remained by her side. Not just as parents, but as unshakable pillars, quiet, steady, ready to hold her up. As the rest of the world began to fall apart, when the editor who had sent them to the Shakti mills heard the news, he was devastated when the news reached him. What had started as a routine assignment had turned into something unspeakable. He rushed to the hospital the next morning, shaken by guilt and anger. The attack wasn't just a crime, it was a direct blow to the freedom of the press, to the safety of young professionals who dared to document truth. Meanwhile, the Mumbai police launched a full investigation. Forensic teams sealed off the Shakti Mills compound. What was once a forgotten relic of the city's industrial past was now a sprawling crime scene. Investigators searched for clues, bloodstains, broken belongings, discarded items, all of which would soon become crucial pieces of evidence. News of the incident hadn't yet reached the public, but murmurs were beginning. Inside police circles, within hospital corridors, among the press, people had begun to talk. Something horrific had happened, and this time it wasn't going to be buried. Ria, still in her hospital bed, requested a notebook. Her hands trembled as she gripped the pen, but she began to write. She didn't document what happened in graphic detail. She focused on what it represented. The fear, the injustice, the unshakable need for accountability. She didn't want pity. She wanted change. And while she recovered behind closed doors, outside, the storm was about to break. As news of the Shakti Mills assault quietly began to ripple through Mumbai's law enforcement and media networks, the case had already taken on an urgency that few others had. The brutality, the location, the involvement of a young journalist, it struck a nerve. The pressure on the Mumbai police was mounting, and they knew public outrage was only a headline away. Within 48 hours, multiple teams had been deployed to track leads. Forensic evidence gathered from the crime scene was being processed. CCTV footage near Mahalakshmi station was pulled. Anonymous tips began to come in. A few names emerged, men with prior records, loosely connected by geography and circumstance. Then a call came from within the crime branch's own files. It was quiet, almost overlooked. A case logged just 3 weeks before Ria Sharma's assault. It had been shelved due to a lack of cooperation from the victim and insufficient evidence. But now it glared back like a red flag that had been ignored. The victim was a 19-year-old call center employee, Meghna Desai. She had never gone public. Her assault had taken place in the exact same location, the abandoned Shakti Mills compound. The details were disturbingly similar. She had been lured in by false assurances. Her male companion had been tied up. She had been threatened, violated, and warned not to speak. In her case, the attackers had also taken photographs. The resemblance to Ria's case was no coincidence. When the police revisited Megna's file, they noticed something else. Names. Descriptions of the attackers that now closely matched the ones Ria had provided. It was no longer just one horrifying incident. It was a pattern. Megna had initially refused to pursue the case. The trauma, the fear of social stigma, the worry of losing her job, all of it had pushed her into silence. But after discovery that another lady had gone through what she went through, she decided to speak up, and her story filled in critical gaps in the investigation. Her statement aligned perfectly with key timelines. She recalled one of the men referring to getting away with it once already. That chilling remark, dismissed at the time as incoherent trauma, now took on new weight. The Shakti Mills case was no longer about a single victim. It had become the story of a systemic failure. The men who attacked Ria had done it before, and they had returned to the same location, emboldened by the silence that followed. The media hadn't yet broken the story, but behind the scenes the narrative had changed. This wasn't an isolated attack. It was a cycle, one that only now was being uncovered. As police began issuing arrest warrants and raiding the homes of known suspects, a clearer picture emerged of the 5 men. They were not masterminds. They were opportunists, men with little to lose and a dangerous sense of invincibility. Most had prior petty criminal records. 2 had been previously detained for harassment. None had faced serious consequences before. But now, with 2 women speaking out, with forensic evidence in hand, and with public attention closing in, that era of impunity was coming to an end. Back in the hospital, Ria was informed of the minor breakthrough. She said nothing at first. Then she asked a single question. Was she alone too? The answer was no. She wasn't alone. Investigators worked methodically. Leads were cross-referenced, mobile phone records pulled, and teams were deployed across Mumbai and its outskirts. The breakthrough came when a partial fingerprint, lifted from a shattered phone screen left behind at the scene, matched a known petty offender in the city's criminal database, Imran Qureshi, 26. He had been in and out of custody over the years for theft and assault. Police located him in a slum near Mahalaxmi. He was caught sleeping in a makeshift room above a mechanic's workshop. His arrest opened the floodgates. Through Qureshi's phone, police quickly identified others who had been in close contact with him in the days surrounding the attack. They tracked mobile signals, compared tower pings, and soon narrowed down the core group. Salim Sheikh, 24, and Vikram Thakur, 25, were the next to fall into the net. Both had records of harassment and drug possession, though neither had ever been prosecuted fully. Salim was picked up from his sister's house in Dharavi. Vikram had fled to a village on the outskirts of Pune, but police apprehended him within hours after intercepting a call he made to a cousin. But it was the arrest of the 4th suspect that shook the investigation. Ravi Chauhan, believed to be around 18, was found hiding in a railway storeroom where he occasionally worked. But once in custody, his documents revealed a troubling twist. Ravi was only 17 years old, a minor. The Juvenile Justice Board was immediately notified. His role in the assault, active, violent, and indisputable, complicated legal proceedings. Under Indian law, a minor could not be tried as an adult unless specific provisions were invoked. But public emotion didn't care for legal nuance. The idea that someone so young could participate in such brutality outraged even hardened officers. The final suspect, Shahid Pathan, 23, was tracked down in Navi Mumbai. He had been staying with a friend, unaware that the walls were closing in. When officers arrived, he made no attempt to run. It was as if he knew it was only a matter of time. With all 5 in custody, the picture became clearer. These were not masterminds or career criminals. They were men from fractured families, abandoned schools, and broken neighborhoods. But they weren't victims. They had made conscious choices, cruel ones. Each interrogation revealed the same chilling pattern, a belief that they could get away with it. Some had even referred to the earlier July incident involving Meghna Desai, laughing about how nothing came of it. That sense of invincibility had only grown with time. Until now. The arrests ignited something across the city. Word spread fast. The media caught on. Rhea Sharma's identity was protected, but her profession, journalist, became central to the narrative. This wasn't just about violence. It was about power, silence, and who was allowed to speak. Women's groups organized protests, news anchors demanded accountability, hashtags began to trend. For the first time, the forgotten Shakti Mills compound was on every screen and in every conversation. Meanwhile, forensic reports came back with damning clarity. DNA evidence linked at least 4 suspects to the scene. Photographs recovered from their phones matched the survivors' accounts. The case was trial-ready, swift, strong, and backed by undeniable proof. Back in her recovery room, Rhea was told the news. She didn't ask for the suspects' names, she didn't ask how they were caught. Rhea closed her eyes, not in shock, but in sadness. The manhunt was over. The predators were in chains, but something deeper, something far more dangerous, still lived outside the courtroom. Inside a modest courtroom in the heart of Mumbai, justice slowly began to take form. There were no grand speeches or dramatic gestures, only a quiet intensity that hung in the air. Outside, the media gathered, cameras rolling, notebooks open. What had begun in an abandoned mill had now become a legal and national reckoning. The Shakti Mills trial had begun. The prosecution came with an airtight case, DNA evidence, mobile phone data, and recovered images that supported the survivors' accounts. It wasn't just one attack. It was calculated, coordinated, repeated. Rhea Sharma, still recovering from deep emotional and physical wounds, chose to testify. She didn't have to. The evidence spoke loudly on its own, but she insisted. Her voice, though soft, was steady. Her words were measured but powerful. She didn't just tell the court what had happened. She stripped away every layer of denial. Behind her, sitting quietly in the courtroom, were her parents. They had been there since the beginning, from the hospital corridors to every late-night consultation with investigators. Her mother, once skeptical of Rhea's career in journalism, now held her daughter's hand with quiet pride. Her father, a man of few words, had not left her side since the day the news broke. In their eyes was heartbreak, but also strength, the kind that had raised a daughter who would not be silenced. Their presence in court wasn't loud or emotional. It was constant, anchoring. They watched their daughter reclaim her power, one sentence at a time. Meghna Desai took the stand next. Her testimony confirmed a chilling pattern, that what happened to Rhea had also happened to her just weeks earlier, at the same location, with some of the same individuals. She had stayed silent then, but not now, not anymore. The defense tried to discredit the evidence. They raised technical doubts and questioned timelines. But their arguments rang hollow in the face of solid facts and the courage shown by the women who chose to speak. One complication, however, hung over the case. Ravi Chauhan, just a minor at the time, his trial was separated under the Juvenile Justice Act. His participation was confirmed through witness testimony and digital evidence. The law demanded that he be treated differently, and that sparked a national debate. Should age protect someone involved in such a violent act? The question split opinions across media and public platforms. Still, the adult trial moved forward. After weeks of arguments, the court delivered its judgment. The 4 adult accused were found guilty on all charges, including sexual assault, criminal conspiracy, intimidation, and evidence tampering. In a rare and historic move, the court invoked Section 376E of the Indian Penal Code, sentencing them to death, marking the first time this law was applied for repeat offenses of this nature. The courtroom remained silent. No applause, no outburst, just the sound of justice being read into record. Rhea didn't cry, her parents didn't speak, but their silence said enough. Relief didn't erase the pain. But it brought clarity, closure, and a sense that what happened would not disappear into darkness. Justice had been served, not perfectly, not completely, but undeniably. And in that moment, Rhea stood, not as a victim, but as a survivor, supported by the very people who had taught her to never look away from the truth, even when it hurts the most. The sentencing in the Shakti Mills case sent shockwaves across India. The verdict was hailed by many as a landmark moment. swift, strong, and symbolic. Public response was immediate. Women's rights groups organized marches and vigils. News outlets praised the survivors for their bravery. Though their names remained protected, Rhea Sharma and Meghna Desai became powerful symbols of courage and resistance. But the judgment also ignited national debate. The most heated discussions centered around Ravi's age. Should someone so young, involved in such brutality, be tried as a minor? Calls to amend juvenile laws grew louder, with politicians and activists pushing for reform. At the same time, scrutiny fell on the police, particularly their failure to act on Meghna's earlier report. Internal investigations were launched. The system's negligence had come into sharp focus. Justice had been served in court. But for many, the real work had only just begun. Long after the verdicts faded from headlines, the true test began. Healing. For Rhea Sharma, recovery was never just physical. The scars she carried were deeper, quieter, and often invisible. She had returned home after the trial, away from the noise of the media and the weight of public attention. Her parents, once hesitant about her choice to become a journalist, stood by her quietly, never asking for details, only offering space, warmth, and time. Rhea didn't return to journalism immediately. The fire hadn't gone out. It had only changed shape. She began writing privately, reflecting not on the crime, but on survival. Her words weren't fueled by anger, but by clarity. She wrote about broken systems, about power and silence, about how resilience isn't loud, it's steady. Eventually, she began working with local NGOs, helping train young women in media literacy and self-expression. She avoided the spotlight, preferring to uplift others. Her story had inspired many, but she never let it define her. To the public, she was anonymous. But to those she helped, she was a quiet force of strength. Meghna Desai, too, chose a path of service. After initially stepping away from work, she returned to school and earned a degree in psychology. She now worked as a counselor for trauma survivors, often sitting with women who reminded her of her younger self. Silent, scared, unsure if they would be believed. The courtroom had given both women justice, but their lives afterward were about something bigger. Reclaiming identity, purpose, and peace. There were moments of struggle, flashbacks, panic, the discomfort of knowing their attackers still breathed behind bars. But there was also growth, progress, community. They weren't symbols anymore. They were women, living, rebuilding, and no longer defined by what had been done to them. In time, Rhea and Meghna crossed paths again, not in a courtroom, but at a quiet conference on women's safety. No cameras. No reporters, just survivors and advocates in conversation. They didn't speak long. They didn't need to. There was a mutual understanding. They had both turned pain into purpose. And while the world moved on, they continued, not as victims, not even as fighters, but as women who refused to be forgotten or erased. The Shakti Mills case left behind more than just a verdict. It sparked a national conversation. Following the sentencing, the case became a turning point in India's legal and social landscape. In 2015, the Juvenile Justice Act was amended, allowing minors aged 16 and above to be tried as adults in severe criminal cases, a direct response to public demand for stronger accountability. Law enforcement also evolved. Police departments received new training to better handle crimes against women. The initial failure to act on Meghna Desai's complaint became a lesson, prompting reforms in how survivor reports were treated. Awareness programs expanded. Schools, NGOs, and government campaigns began pushing conversations around safety, consent, and justice, even in rural areas. Survivors were no longer dismissed. Their voices began shaping policy. Culturally, the shift was just as important. Words like victim were slowly replaced with survivor. Media coverage became more respectful. People began to speak up and listen. Still, challenges remained. Many cases never made headlines. Justice for some was still out of reach. But something had changed. Silence no longer held the same power. Rhea Sharma and Meghna Desai never sought fame, but through their courage, a system was forced to confront itself, and a nation began to pay attention. They stepped into a place once forgotten, and in doing so, ensured their stories, and others like them, would never be ignored again. If this story moved you, disturbed you, or opened your eyes, subscribe to our channel for more real-life crime documentaries and fictional stories inspired by true events. We uncover the darkest corners of human nature, so you can be more aware, more informed, and maybe even safer. Until next time, stay sharp, stay safe, and never ignore the feeling that something just isn't right.